glad you guys could join. I'm sorry that for multiple reasons now that I couldn't get out of Nashville and get down to New Orleans. But let me start by again thanking Kim, and I'm really glad she was able to pull this together, the whole exposition, which sounds fascinating looking at the lineup of people that are going to be talking on things. But essentially, I kind of made a list, and I'm just going to blast through these titles, and then we'll kind of go back and look at, because the topic of this one was the role of music in films and production insights, and I just wanted to list out at least what I could consider to be, of the, thinking about it, 10 quick job opportunities for people that know music. I mean, the obvious ones people think of are composing or songwriting, and those are ones, composers, people who write music might dream of doing. It's a little different when you're writing for film and television, and we'll talk about that when we look at each of these categories a little closer. But there's also music supervision. There's music supervisors that are involved in the making of film and putting music together, and television, that are actually sort of the gatekeeper between the creators of music, the legal department, and the director and producers, depending on who's in charge. Of course, composers most often have a composer assistant. There's just too much to do and too little time. Computers have made this horrible, the timelines for composers. Then we have orchestrators, copyists. We have synth programmers. We have opportunities with recording engineering. We have on-set sound that has to be done. We have contracting that has to be done. We have audio mixing. And inside of audio mixing on films, there's often sometimes a dialogue editor, a special effects or sound effects editor, and then engineer, and then a music editor. So there's actually a very broad range of opportunity, of which composing and songwriting make up the fewest opportunities. Albeit if that's what you want to do, the most enjoyable and the most creative, potentially most creative. Certainly creative, but a lot of these jobs are highly creative. As a matter of fact, a lot of these jobs are done by people that are composers and songwriters who weren't able to sort of get that part of their career, financial career going, but were able to do it through some of these other opportunities. So they're not ones that in any way, shape, or form should be taken lightly at all, because they're really remarkable. What I did was I said, look, I'm a composer. I work in film and television, so I earn my living, but I do it in a very broad array of activity. The core of what I do is write and record, but there's a lot of other opportunities that are there, and I take advantage of them, and sometimes, or I'm asked to take advantage of other possibilities. So let me just run you through a list of 10 or so jobs that are out there for people that know music and know how to record music. And generally, if you know music, you know how to record it to some degree. But there's a music supervisor, is a role that is really a good one. Of course, composer and songwriter. Composers generally have some kind of assistant, and anybody interested in writing music for film and TV will probably start out, if you're fortunate, as assisting some composer at it. There's orchestrators, copyists, synth programmers, recording engineers, recording mixers to mix the music recorded. There's on-set sound people. That includes boom and utility operators. Well, I'll go through all these a little in more detail when I circle back. Then there's the audio mixer, the man who actually mixes all the film, which includes sound effects, dialogue, Foley, and of course the music. And then there's a music editor. There's often a dialogue editor. While there might be a guy who mixes the film, there's someone who sort of specializes in cleaning up the dialogue. That takes days and days and days. Anyone who's made a film knows how long that takes to sort of clean up production sound and then get full ADR done to replace any bad audio with new audio. So there's an awful lot of opportunities for people that understand sound, understand music, not even counting musicians being a musician on a recording session. So if you're in music, these are all areas in film and television that offer opportunities to earn a living. So I'm going to circle back and kind of hit at the top, starting with music supervisor and sort of talking about what functions I have experienced with music supervisors and what their role is in the process. And it can be a little different between film and television. And maybe I should start there. Let me kind of explain in general terms sort of the difference between film and television as to how a composer or songwriter interacts between the two. And these are all generalizations, guys. The reality is every project is sort of a one-off combination in some way, shape, or form of these following parameters. The most important thing in music we all want to know when we go into a project is who are the decision makers. You're often introduced and sitting in a room. I was on one yesterday for a project. I'm on a Zoom meeting with 51 people in it. First part of the job for me is always to figure out who in this conversation do I need to communicate with and really understand what they want. And in film, generally speaking, you're talking about the director. The director is generally in a film responsible for the creative decisions of a project. That means the casting of it. They go on all the location scouting. They're the ones who sort of have the vision as to how the scene is going to be shot. That doesn't mean they don't collaborate with the writers and the producers. Certainly anybody in charge of the financial resources is going to have a say about things. But generally speaking, in a film, you work one-on-one with the director and kind of take the lead from what the director's after. And you sort of your partner and the director's partner in that, or as I would say, the translator, is often the music supervisor. You know, it's very uncommon for a director to have any strong musical literacy, though there are many that do. But for the most part, it's somewhat intimidating to directors. If you go look at the curriculum at any film school program, you're hard pressed to find many courses they take on music and the use of music in film. It's really, they do lighting, they do casting, they do writing, they do production, they do editing. But for some reason, music has been slow to web its way into the curriculum in any kind of profound degree for filmmakers. So they often are very intimidated by the language. They don't know the language of music. They don't understand it. And so they're sometimes afraid to speak up for fear of feeling ridiculous or ignorant. And what I say to anybody in music is your job is to make that person, whoever that is, feel comfortable. Let them know it's not their job to speak your language. It's your job to interpret their language and to understand what they want. That's part of the job of writing music for film, is understanding what the director wants and understanding it very often in highly non-musical terms, highly non-musical. If you've ever worked in advertising, you'll laugh and remember when you hear things like, can you make the music sound more purple or green? I need more gold. It's got to have this. And these adjectives that can be difficult until you've been around a while to sort of translate into sound, and getting to know the person and what they mean by those words. So that's a big part of the composer's job. The music supervisor is often the person that helps translate musical language into language that a director will understand, and to help communicate and sometimes defend the composer's work. If the director's not getting it, the music supervisor often will step into the conversation and try to get the director to understand a little bit more about what the composer's after and why it works, if they believe it works. So they can be a great ally, and they can be a great ally to the director, helping communicate where there are communication issues with the composer, because directors are pulled in 43 different directions at any given moment. So it's very hard for them to focus for a long period of time on one thing. I'm trying to remember, there's only a few directors I know that I've worked with that come to scoring sessions even anymore. And that's partly due to what I'm about to go into on composing side, what that's about. Music supervisors also are the ones who are going to select, or not select, but they're going to assemble options for songs that are going to be in the movie. So they will know that there's a scene that needs a song. It could be a montage, it could be opening credits, could be end credits, it could just be a spot in the movie they want to put a song in. It could be a radio gets turned on, or there's a band playing in the bar, what we call source music. They're in charge of finding and locating options for what we call source music. By definition, source music is any music that you can look at the film or TV show and go, oh, the music's coming from there. And score generically is the music, you don't know where it's coming from. It's just supporting the film and was written for the film. Very often, source music was not written for the film, but gets used in the film. Although we all know there are lots of commissions that go on for writing songs specifically for a film. But for the by and large, most of them are music that was written before the film took place and is being licensed into it. And the music supervisor handles that licensing. So this used to be done by lawyers, but lawyers didn't know very much often about music. So this role called music supervisor was created. And they negotiate with the record labels and with the owners of the music and the publishing, whoever owns the publishing and the master recording. The music supervisor negotiates those deals and stays within a budget. And they're very often in charge of the entire music budget. They know how much the budget is for the score, how much it is for source music, for recording, whatever expenses are going to happen. And they're the ones who keep an eye on that. One of the ones who keeps an eye on that and make sure that they're getting the songs that they need and they're getting the score that they need. So it's a really important position and a very high power position. And for those interested, there's now a guild of music supervisors, which you can look up on the internet. And they do great workshops and great things, and they have wonderful mentors and people there. The next, and again, if any of y'all have any questions, please chime in. The next position I'll talk about is the one that I get to do a lot. It's composing. I've touched on some of the interactions and on the film side, but it does change on the television side. On the television side, very often the decision maker is called, it's a producer, or what they call them in television is the showrunner, the person who's in charge of getting all the episodes from beginning to end, supervising all of that and producing that in a large way. There'll be producers underneath them that deal with segments of it, but there's one person that's sort of like the guy. It could be the person who created the show, it could be the person who the network brought in someone to work with the writer and manage the show that they trust, because they're spending a lot of money doing this. And in that world of television, very often it's the showrunner and it's that side of the fence that decides what music works or doesn't work, or what songs do or don't get in. It's not very often the director, for the simple reason is that most television shows that are multiple episodes are not directed. Every episode is not directed by the same person. So it's different people, sometimes week to week. The one I'm working on in New Orleans right now is the Interview with a Vampire, and they've built it in blocks of 2. So one director's doing the first and second episode, some other directors doing 3 and 4, and then someone 5 and 6, etc. So they're entirely different creative teams. So the UPM, the unit production manager, is the one who needs to keep it all focused and organized and having a consistent look and sound to it. So that's why in television, it's very often a producer or the showrunner that is in charge of the musical side. It's a lot of the larger decisions, always in collaboration with the director and his people and his team. There's a whole team there that's taking care of it. One of the things that's happened, and I mentioned about how timelines and why a lot of times directors aren't even at scoring sessions anymore, is that we're expected nowadays, most of us, by that I mean probably all but about 10 people I can think of, when we write a score, we have to mock it up. And by mock up, I mean you sit here I do at my computer with 12 terabytes of samples, sounding like an orchestra or a bouzouki band or whatever sound I'm going for. And I have to create a demo that utilizes virtual instruments that make that sound, so that when they hear a scene, no longer can I sit at a piano like I used to. I'm old enough to have been there before computers and play a melody on the piano and say, this is your love theme, and we'll make it big and there'll be strings. And they would have to wait to the recording session to hear it. And the beauty of that for we composers was that's often an expensive day. So changes don't come fast. They have to be very judicious when they ask for changes, because it's very expensive. Nowadays, though, by the time we go record a score, most of us, 99% of us, they know exactly what it's going to sound like. It's just going to sound better because we're replacing fake flutes with real flutes or fake strings with real strings. And generally what we're doing, even on big scores, is mixing fake and real together. It's become, the sound of film is one very often that uses synthetic sounds and samples mixed with real sounds. And so a lot of times directors and producers don't feel the need to go to recording sessions anymore. And that's a blessing and a curse. It's a curse because it's really nice to record a piece of music and have the decision maker say, yeah, I love it. And then you know it's done. As opposed to you do it, you mix it, you send it in, and then you wait to hear it's okay, or how many notes you get back. And you will get notes back. I mentioned as a composer assistant, and that's because writing music for a film often requires a lot of technology, more than just the programs we use to write the music, but then edit it, keep it moving, realize it, take it from fake, setting up a Pro Tools session to go into the studio. There's a lot of steps that have to take place, and we don't get that much time. So it's often very necessary to have an assistant who knows more about technology, because generally they're younger. So you need people who know technology and can clean up your computer or help Kim out when her internet won't work. It's like, I'll rant and curse and walk out the room and pour a cup of coffee, and the assistant makes it work and everything's good again. Now, inside of that team as well for a composer, I mentioned orchestrator. You know, when you do a score and you do it in the computer, or even if you do it on pencil and paper, someone needs to take that and actually write out assign all the notes and individual parts to all the instruments that you're using, or to whatever ones you're going to use for that particular cue. Cue being a piece of music that starts and ends and score inside the film. And that requires someone, and very often what we used to do is sometimes we would just do 2 or 3 piano, it would look like double piano notation, and put horns or put brass up here and strings down here and hand it to someone who would then have a big score paper and write it out by hand. But now it's all done on the computer. So you send a MIDI file and someone takes that MIDI file and pulls it apart, cleans it up so that it'll look good as notation, puts it into a separate program that actually notates it. And that's the orchestrator. They will do that part. Then there's a copyist. And the copyist is the person who takes the work the orchestrator did, the full score of music, all the lines, and then copies each individual line so that the flute player just gets the flute part, the violinist just gets the violin part, etc. So that's done by a copyist. And these are all wonderful jobs that require a knowledge of music, reading music, and of course technology, because we do it now with computers, these things. Synth programmers. It's a great thing for here's where we get into a lot of guys who come from the rock and pop world who might not necessarily write music for film, but we composers need people who I can turn to and say, create me a sound that sounds like this. And someone who can then get onto a synthesizer and make that sound happen. That's an amazing skill to have, an amazing one to have. And every composer I know has people they turn to build sounds, because you just don't have time to do it when you're writing. For instance, I'm going to record January 25th and 26th, a score I'm working on right now. I'm only only. Don't tell the producers and the director. I am an hour and 10 minutes into the film writing, still have 20 more minutes of film. Not all of it needs music, but I'm working on it now. And that's just all on the computer. That then has to go through the orchestration process, the copyist process, and all those. There's going to be about 46 cues, 46 separate pieces of music I have to record. And each one of those a Pro Tool session has to be built with what we call the stems, the prelays. In other words, there's certain instruments that I won't replace with real ones. I'm going to use mine. There's synth pads. All that has to be exported and a Pro Tool session built for each one of those cues. So there's a lot of work to do. So again, why you have assistants, why you have other people who help do the printed music for you, so you can take care of whatever you consider to be your strength and your strongest opportunity, your strong points. Songwriters, songwriters when very, custom songs have to be written. There is that. Knowing how to do a good demo, or as we all say in the music industry now who write for film and television, there is no such thing as a demo anymore. Music is either perfect or not. And if it's not, it's harder to get it through. Especially if you're not Diane Warren, or you're not Randy Newman, or those guys, I'm sure, can sit at a piano and clank on it and sing you a song, and it's going to be what it is, and then they'll produce it later. But most of us have to go through the trouble, and songwriters same way, of really producing a slick demo. And I know I had to do for this film I'm working on. We had 7 songs that had to be written, and 4 of them were using the demo track, just maybe taking out fake guitars and putting in real ones, or fake drum and putting in a real drum, by just replacing a few of the parts, because it's just good the way it is. And so it's fine. But that's how good demos are today, is you can almost release them, just polish them. And just polishing can take a long time, but it's quicker than if you have to go in and do it from scratch. And producers and directors, God bless them, or I should just say people, because of technology, there's a lot less development in early life, it seems like, on being able to imagine what something will sound like. Being able to hear a demo and hear through the cheap sounds, or you didn't spend a lot of money doing it, and understand the essence of what it is and how good it can be. So you can't really depend on strumming a guitar and going, yeah, your score, I'm going to build these ideas up with the orchestra. I have a friend that did that at a Warner Brothers film. He actually went into the screening of the rough cut with the director and sat in front by the screen with his guitar and an amp and played guitar along with it, and was immediately released from the film, and they got a new composer. You can't do that anymore, and he's a famous guitar player. So you have to really, even with songwriting like that, they're just down to the technical part. Recording engineers, recording engineers, the one, you guys in New Orleans know I love is Misha, working with Misha over at Esplanade Studios. And Misha is a bass player. He was a musician and made his living. Loyola recruited him from the Republic of Georgia over to the school. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying he was pretty quickly thrown out of school because he wasn't coming. He was gigging too much. And the program didn't really want that. So Misha was scholarship taken away, and he became a musician, or earned his living playing music, was a musician earning his living. And then at some point, like most of us, you get to a certain age in your life where you realize you're not going to be the next Jimi Hendrix or the next Stanley Clarke if you're a bass player, or Jocko. So you end up turning to other parts of your skills. And Misha had an amazing skill at engineering and recording and mixing music, and a love of technology and microphones and everything I don't really want to think about. Misha is into. He loves vintage microphones, fixing them up. He loves to position microphones and move them around. He loves all these details that literally drive me crazy if I had to do it. But Misha discovered that this is something he had a great skill for. And which takes me to a point, and I'll continue down this list, but one of the points here is that if you're going to make it in film and television, and really if you're going to make it in the music industry, and you're not going to be the superstar, you're going to be the person, one of the people behind the superstar. And in a movie, the movie is the superstar. You are just one of the people that are partaking and creating and keeping that image going of that product. What I'm going to say is that with that in, hang on, I lost my thought. What is really important, and I say to all of my students, is you need to learn to do all the things the superstar can't do. So what do I mean by that? Well, very often people that are in popular music, if you're in popular music, they don't might necessarily read music, which means they can't write out horn parts or write out string parts. They can't write out things for musicians that play by reading music. So I say to anybody who's not going to be a superstar, even if you are going to be a superstar, but certainly if you're not, learn how to read music, learn how to write it down. You don't have to be the guy who can sight read Bach and make it sound great, but you offer a service now to guys who can't. I do a lot of orchestral arranging for Tank and the Bangas when they play with the orchestra. We're getting ready to have a show next Friday with the orchestra. They're going to have a show, but there's 11 songs on there that I've written, their songs that I've orchestrated for the orchestra to play with them. That's because they can't do that. So they hire someone like me to do it. I've worked for composers on huge feature films. Their friend was directing, so they got hired as the composer. And for the first time, they're doing it for a major studio, and they're going to have to record it with a large orchestra. Well, they don't know how to orchestrate. They don't know how to conduct. They don't know how to hire an orchestra or put a session of that magnitude together. So Warner Brothers will hire me to do it. And so I've made a living as well, orchestrating, copy work, conducting for other composers, because I have that skill set. So I think it's really relevant to figure out on this list and whatever list you come up with, what you're most interested in and what supports what people who might be more the front people, if that's not your goal. And it wasn't my goal to be out front. On-set sound, that's another place a lot of musicians end up doing, which is they are the ones on set who are recording the dialogue, and you're mixing it in real time with sound and really making sure that what's going to tape is good. It's a job that, generally speaking, they know about music because they're also in charge of playback. If there is a scene with music in it that needs to be played so that the band can pretend to play it or people are dancing, the on-set sound guy is in charge of that. If it's a big enough budget and they're busy just mixing a lot of the microphones that are the dialogue going on, they can hire a playback person, which is another place that a musician can get a $500 or $750 a day job doing. And inside of the on-set sound, there's a boom operator, a job that just amazes me. The guy holding the big stick all day long with the mic on the end. I don't know how they do it. There's a whole technique to it about weight, being on the right angle, and it seems to not be something I've been interested in doing, so I stayed away from it. And then there's even a utility guy. I mean, there's always a big cart, 3 feet across and 5 feet high, full of cables, this is plugs, this is and that, so all having to do with sound. And that utility guy is in charge of that cart and making sure when the guy says, I need a 1/4-inch plug, he knows what that is and get it. Or I need an adapter from 1/4-inch to RCA. So just the things that musicians know from working, growing up and playing music. And then the last one, well, let's not forget musician, actually playing the music that's being written for a film. There's that opportunity and a great one. It's a fantastic job. It's just limited. The amount of people that there are who can play music and the amount of jobs there are, it's a highly competitive job, but very rewarding financially and very rewarding creatively if you can get into that. But then there's the audio mixer. Probably the most successful one in New Orleans is a Larry Blake, or this John Vogel. But Larry is Steven Soderbergh's guy. He mixes all of Steven's films. And when I say mixes, you know, I deliver, when I work with Larry or he's on a project, I deliver my music to him, dialogue people, the dialogue, the sound effects, and Larry puts it all into the Pro Tools, and he is in charge of mixing it all and making it all sound right. Mixing is just one part of it. He then has to export a stereo mix, a 5.1 mix, a 7.1 mix. He has to put out an Atmos mix now. There are so many ways for it to have to come together and be output. So there's a lot of technological knowledge there, but at the core of it is Pro Tools. So, and again, most musicians, since we record, have certainly familiar with Pro Tools, but it is a use of Pro Tools that's a little different than we do when we just record music. So those were just off the top of my head, meaning this last week I've been thinking about opportunities where people who are involved in music, know music, could explore if writing music might not be in the cards for you, or is not something you're able to really do. A lot of people don't write music but can play. So I don't know if anybody has any. I know there's a lot of 45 minutes of yak in there, but if anybody has any thoughts or questions, I'm happy to answer anything y'all like.
My name is George Long. I had a couple questions about your process.
Sure, George.
One was, what do you personally find more fulfilling? Is it the collaboration with the director, or maybe the other side I would think would be the time that you spend alone just working on instrumentation or orchestration?
Well, I would say, first off, good question, good insight as to kind of the two big chunks of responsibility that will fall. I will reflect right now because I'm in the middle of I'm at the end of the writing process on this film. Nothing feels as good as sending. Well, let me tell you how we do this. So I get up, it's usually 4 a.m, make a huge pot of coffee and drink about 24 cups, well, measured by the side of the coffee mug twice, or the coffee pot. It's about 12. My pot holds 12, and I do it twice a day right now. So whatever that truly is, I don't know if those are really cups. I pray not, but I'm drinking 24 cups a day of coffee. But I drink coffee all day long. So it's always with me when I'm working on a project. So at 4 a.m, I'm up writing a cue and a piece of music and recording it. And then I have to, when I send it to the director, and this is technology today, I use Cubase, but Cubase, Logic, Digital Performer, they all can do this. I then export or bounce down. When I bounce the music down with the dialogue, it puts it into the film, and it takes the hour-and-a-half film and just turns it into a little 90-second or 2-minute, however long the scene is. I email that to the director. And then I start on the next cue and wait for them to wake up and then watch what I've done. And I do this all day long. So you're cranking out, or you're hopefully, I need to put out right now where I am on this film, probably 6 or 7 minutes a day of finished music. And by finished, I mean, they give me back notes, I change it. Now to your question, is it the writing of the music that is the strongest rush of fulfillment, or is it the interacting with the director? Right now, it's the interacting with the director. When I get back an email that says, here's 2 I got this morning. 3. One was love it. So that was the 37th cue, back to school. She loved it. Version 1, I didn't have anything to change on that. Let me tell you, I just loved it. The second one was, can you send me the scene without any music in it? They had temped music in the film in a certain scene, and I was replacing it and writing stuff that fit our movie into it. And I happened to have agreed that they should look at the scene without music. She did, and then she just sent an email, let's leave it out. So that's one less cue I have to record. I'm thrilled about that. So I have to say, towards the end of the process, George, my biggest rush of yay, excitement, butterflies in the stomach comes when a director likes something I did. So the collaborative part. Prior to that, when I have like 4 weeks out and I'm just starting a project, it's the discovering the new melodies and themes and sounds that I'm going to use that gives you great joy, because you get to explore again, try new things out. And that's a big rush. But once you're in it, every step of it I love, the orchestrating of it, the writing. But right now, just getting a director to say, love it, makes me feel so good because I'm running out of time. So I hate to be so pragmatic, but there's a huge pragmatic aspect to writing music for film. Does that answer your question, dude?
Oh yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Do you have advice for somebody who's looking for a career as a music supervisor and has already done training and lots of studying, but is really ready to get to work and get started getting gigs and stuff?
Sure. Well, look, here's the God's honest truth that I'm going to tell you. And the irony is, I didn't necessarily do this. So the irony is, I've built a nice life not following the advice I'm going to give, but making it in film and television. There's several factors that are involved in it. So here's the truth of it. There is several factors, and I always forget my friend George Clinton, not with George S. Clinton, the composer, shared this with Loyola when he came to town and with me. But you know, networking is probably one of the most important things you can do. And so luckily we have the internet. The curse of it is we have the internet. The blessing is we have the internet. So when it comes to marketing, you don't necessarily have to spend a ton of money to get your name out there and what you're doing out there, assuming people are looking at your accounts. The other big factor that's a part of it is luck. There's a lot of luck involved, but as George pointed out when he and I were talking about it and he shared it with the class, luck, you can affect how much luck you have. And how do you do that? Well, your best chance of getting lucky is to be around as many opportunities as you can to be lucky. So that means being in a place where people are making films, making television, and need music. And the sad reality is, in the case of for us not who aren't there already, the place where you're going to have a better shot of having luck is in Los Angeles if you want to work in film and television. Doesn't mean you have to stay there forever, but going out there and making contacts with directors and composers and studios is the way you're going to get jobs. Now you could out there or from there. And so if you're in New Orleans or Slidell or wherever else you live, you need to suss out who in your area is doing film and then go hustle them and introduce yourself and try to get a job through that. So that personal contact is really important. My only point about Los Angeles is there is more opportunity out there than there is anywhere else. There's more decisions are being made in Los Angeles, what TV shows get done. And if you get a TV show, you might be responsible for finding 5, 6, 7, 10. I had to record 14 pieces of music for the first 2 episodes of the show I'm working on in New Orleans. That's 7 pieces recorded per episode on average. And they had 2 or 3 others to get. Then there's the score to get, and the music supervisors are involved in all of that. But neither of them, one lives in New York, one lives in Los Angeles. That are the supervisors on that show. I pre-COVID, I was going out to Los Angeles 2 or 3 times, 4 times a year, having lunches with the people I work for, or have worked with in the past, so they just don't forget who I am. So the biggest thing I can tell you is to get yourself in front of directors and people making film and television. And I would say, if you want to increase the number of people you can get yourself in front of, at least do some scouting trips to Los Angeles or New York, where people are actually putting these shows together and introduce yourself. And if you have no credits yet, then look for a job working underneath a music supervisor. Because they often they have assistance, they need help. And nowadays with COVID and even whenever we can say post-COVID era, everybody's gotten used to these kind of Zoom and working distantly. A lot of people don't want to go back to an office. And if that maintains and that holds, it sort of doesn't matter. It might not matter so much where you live as long as you have the contacts. And the way to get the contacts you don't have is to work with someone who has those contacts so you can meet those people. So that would be my long-winded best advice to you.
So so I also just want to ask you what your process was for confronting writer's block whenever you have it. And yeah, like then if you could just talk about that.
To be honest, Chris, I find the two greatest motivators to get through writer's block are simple. One is a deadline, okay? If I have a deadline, that usually, I think composers, we're often really good procrastinators. All of a sudden my room's messy and I want to straighten it up, and I never straighten my room up. But if I want to procrastinate, I think we all have this tendency when we have to write something and we're not ready to confront it, we find other things to occupy our time that feel productive. And all we're really doing, all I'm really doing psychologically is getting myself closer to the deadline, which is going to then trigger me to jump into high gear and just do what I have to do. So I find deadlines work great. And the other part of that, which I know you're at the beginning of your career, the other part of it that really is a great way to kill writer's block is to realize I want the money they're paying me. Money is a great motivator, dude, and a great inspiration, I find. Because I want to record this music, I need their money to do it. I want to sit in front of the orchestra or in front of the 5 players, whatever it is. I get a rush recording music, and I get a big rush paying musicians, because I think musicians are underpaid resources in our community, and they're not getting what they deserve. And I get a great thrill out of paying people. And so I really enjoy that, and that really does. However, if those two things aren't working for me, I'll be frank with you and tell you, I call other assistants, other people I know. I might say, hey man, what's your thoughts on this? I don't know what to do. You want to give this a stab? Let me hear. So I'll actually collaborate with other composers until I kind of get it going. Reminds me of that scene in, I think it was just a great movie, Shakespeare in Love. You saw that movie when Shakespeare's in the bar, and oh gosh, how can I forget his name? The great actor, the one who was famous during Shakespeare's time, is there, and he asks Shakespeare what he's working on, and Shakespeare tells him, and it's like, Someone in the Pirate's Daughter, just a horrible title. And his name, Philip Marlowe, he turns to Shakespeare and gives him the name for his characters, Romeo, Juliet, and their families hate each other. He kind of gives them this outline of a story, and it totally inspires Shakespeare. Along with He Falls in Love, point of the movie, and he goes and begins to create what becomes one of the greatest masterpieces of the English language. So I don't hesitate to call my friends, to call my colleagues and say, hey man, I can't figure out what to do here. What do you think? And someone will prod me in a direction, something to go listen to imitate. And that would be the last thing I would tell you, Chris, is very often, if I don't have a great idea, I find a great idea and start to imitate it. And ultimately, because I can't do what those guys do, I can only do what I know how to do, it becomes mine at some point. So imitating other people is a great starting point to break through the writer's block for me.
Great, thank you. Those are